Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, asseyez-vous. Please sit down. So while people find their seats, just two quick reminders. I asked the public what the feedback is so far, and there was an acoustic problem. So if we speak, we have to speak into the microphone, and it has to be close to our mouths. That was one feedback. And for me, I'm moderating too much. Please talk among each other. You can contradict each other. You can interject. You can ask each other questions. The less I speak, the better for the proceedings. Thank you so much to the team for the wonderful lunch. As I said, the breaks in such proceedings are even more important maybe than the panels that take place in such an oval panel. And the lunch breaks also serve for ill-prepared people like me to get inspiration to what to talk about next. And I couldn't help myself but to notice the egg that we had on the table. And the eggs play a certain role in Michael Günzburger's work. At the end of the exhibition, we see the collaboration room, and in there we see eggs on a photograph where you have printed over, then the eggs printed themselves. Eggs seem to play a role in some of the prints on display. And I'm sure that you all know the story of the egg of Columbus. It gets told in two different versions. One of them, so Vasari, the famous art historian, tells us this story, right? There's a discussion about how mundane it is that Columbus discovered the Americas, that everybody could have done it. And so he asks the people at the table to put an egg on its tip so that it stays and stands like that. And then they all can't because the shape of the egg doesn't allow it to stand on its tip. And then Columbus takes the egg, and then the two versions come into play. In one version, which is told mostly in South America, is that he puts the salt on the table from the salt pot and puts the egg into the salt so that it stands upright. And the other version, the European version, the colonial version, is that he takes the egg and does this. Doesn't work. There is a very beautiful beginning in the preface of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where she talks about that moment. And I would like to, this is the only quote today, so don't worry. Now I need my glasses. So she writes in the preface to Frankenstein, "Invention does not consist in creating out of the void, but out of chaos. In all matters of discovery and invention, even those that pertain to the imagination, we continue to be reminded of the story of Columbus and his egg." So what she says is that creation doesn't come out of a void, but it comes out of chaos. And Michael Günzburger, when he talks about his printing with eggs, he also always talks about what in German one would call rumeiern, which is difficult to translate into English. I saw a very interesting translation in English, which was flummoxing around, or to flummox around. It's a nice translation because to flummox means to astonish somebody, and flummoxing around means to wander aimlessly. I think in French, my French is really bad, but you would say fureter son but, fureter son but. So this means to wander around aimlessly. And this is one of the main themes that I would like to introduce to the panel now. We talked about it, Inma talked about it, Dirk and Michael talked about it, you talked about it, Theophile. It's this strange and eternal dichotomy between control and letting go that is inherent in the process of printmaking. And I would like to ask you, Inma, to start with it because you brought it up, right? You said that for you, the magic of printing is something that comes out of this chaos of trying to control the process. Could you elaborate a little bit on your process and how you handle this?
Well, I was just actually talking about this. Can you hear me now? Yeah, with Leonie about how unorthodox I am in the way I work when I am dealing. Because in the context of teaching, maybe I'm gonna go back there. When somebody needs to teach or transmit how to go through certain processes in the context of print, it's all about following rules and being very precise. And over the years, I've realized, and this is the way I work in the studio, that all the poetical potential of the world of print is in breaking those rules or in playing within the limits of those rules, but then letting off the control. I'll put examples of maybe how I, just starting from the simple fact that to work with a copper plate, for example, to make an etching, you would have to degrease it, you will have to clean it very well so that when you put the grounding, it stays properly. So then when you etch it afterwards, you know, it's holding the surface, etc., etc. But you could just not be so precise within those different steps that one needs to follow and let that the interaction of my own body, this is what I have done many times, like letting the grease of my hands touch the material, oxidize the surfaces, and then, well, basically let the magic happen. And then also another way that I have to address it is that as I was saying before, I stopped working with the paper for a really long while, and then do well into the things that I could do with acids, with copper sulfate, for example, is a material that I have used a lot lately, and crystallize over surfaces that are not flat. That I think that it's also maybe something that is quite interesting about Mikael's show, that it's constantly having a conversation with what you can do in a flat surface and how you can also work with the pressure and what pressure actually does to the paper or to the interaction with inks, or well, what an egg can actually do when it's flattened. But at least to me, like the idea of imprint, and maybe I would use more that word, because imprint and trace, to me, it's actually the base of everything, or where all the potentialities of what can come after in the context of printing, it is in there, like a scar, a mark that actually contains all that information that can then later on reproduced in many different ways. But that doesn't necessarily need to be on a flat surface. That I think that's what, you know, how you see it, but like also professional printers, or the idea that we have of, yeah, a print goes to. Yeah.
So, I mean,
It is.
yeah, you create out not of the void, but out of this chaos that exists before the logos, as the old version of the Bible tells us, right? Out of chaos comes logos. And I don't want to call you the son of God, Tommy, but you like Prometheus, right? You bring the technical aspects of this creation of logos out of, or the poetical, as you call it, out of the chaos. No, what I want to ask is, how do you have a very specific role, right? And how do you negotiate those spaces? You don't.
No, not at all. You know, I just had last week, I was discussing with my boys in the team of the stone printing. It was mid-January, and I told them what will happen all this year. And it's also the policy of the print shop. How should we behave with our artists? So you show them a little bit who will come sooner or later. And our policy is always that we take the artists where they are. So it's like our artist is like a big zoo. We are nice to all of them, but maybe an elephant needs not a fish, but the fish is okay for the penguin. We have the same rule for everybody, but it's for Michael, it's very important that we can print properly for another artist, and it's very important for another artist that they can look how the prints come out if you behave differently. So for us, it's very easy. We do the opposite as here. We start with the food. We eat first, and we discuss where is the artist. And sometimes I have this example. We had Douglas Gordon, who were renting the studio for 4 weeks, and he arrived and said, "Tommy, I would like to do art without working so hard." And I said, "Oh, it's a nice place for that." And he was really super tired. So the first plate we made of him was when he was sleeping on, and we were lightening the printing plate with him. So, and I work the same way when I work with Michael. I'm only supporting him, but he's the boss. We have to help him to do art. In the end, it doesn't have to look like a litho. It doesn't have to look like a woodcut. It doesn't has to look like printed by Wolfensberger. That would be a shame. So our role is to know how to use these machines that we offer. We have to give some advices about color, paper, and all this stuff. But the magic piece is that we have good clients. And we are lucky that we will have about 40 to 50 people coming in this year. And that's the magic stuff, that they will do art. And we try to help them.
I'm not sure if I believe you. Michael, if you work with Tommy, is it the way that he describes it?
Say yes, say yes.
Yes.
No, I mean, for example, I know if we look at one of the striking things about that exhibition is the size of the prints. And I'm not used to that, right? I mean, normally prints have a certain size, and these sizes exceed the printing size of what I normally see. Is that just because he has a very big machine, or?
Yes.
Okay.
No, no. We just had a quick discussion between each other because I asked him what he's going to print next, and you're printing or you're doing a reproduction of a print by Le Corbusier, and you were mentioning that it's how important it is, or how much an artist like me, who kind of tries to push the limits of, or tries to, I don't know if you can even call it limits, but I just try to find a way that is comfortable or uncomfortable, but to find a place in that print workshop where something happens that is unexpected. How much an artist like me can profit from you being able to reproduce a piece by Le Corbusier 500 times in the exact same quality. And I think it's also the other way around. So also there, I think it just doesn't make any sense to be dogmatic about what's the right thing. But I think coming to your workshop, I remember when I arrived the first time, you said, "Oh, this is like a spa." And I was like, okay, I like spas. And then the second time I came, I thought like, oh, it's like I'm being coached by a great soccer team coach. So I think it has a lot to do with wellness and sports, being in that print workshop also. But actually, and which is all about team, maybe the spa less, but actually it's a team thing. And that's the nice thing about a technique like printing. Now we're talking about the lithography workshop. That is a place where art happens. But if we go into serial printing, high editions, stuff like that, there's like each process is highly specialized. There's a job for each single part of the process, or there was even further back. it was what's called Arbeitsteilung in German, like every step of the way is actually distinct. And I think that implies that it's teamwork. And in the arts, where there's still this catastrophic idea of the artist as a genius working alone, this is a great moment because we're actually talking about art while making it. And this is a very intimate, but also a very important moment where stuff like a bit more red, a bit more blue, up, down, is not just technical thing. It's actually content. That's what becomes the art in the end. And I think if you ask me how to describe the work in that print workshop, I don't know how it is for you as an artist to work in other print workshops. What your experience is there?
I must confess that I have worked with printers very little. I have been mostly always printing by myself, but still I have worked in spaces where there was other artists working at the same time. So I agree with you that is a very delicate moment when you're sharing with some other people, I mean, either space or even letting others give feedback about what you are doing, because it's very delicate that you are exposing yourself very much and you feel very vulnerable. But still, I think that the dynamics of the print world have been built around collaboration, and that constant company and actually feedback from other people, it's a must, or at least in the first years of when somebody's learning, because nobody has a press or all those facilities just to work for themselves. So I just see that collaboration and interaction is just is natural in this, whether maybe working with other mediums not necessarily is. Yeah.
So you talk about this workshop situation, either between artist and craftsman or between artists. Another collaboration that is very often overlooked is the collaboration between the editor and the artist, Dirk. How do you collaborate with your artists? And at the same time, because that's the title of our panels, what do we print next? What will you print next, and how is this collaboration happening?
So let's say the procedure in our case is that we have a jury once a year, where members from the Vorstand Beirat, so from the board of the association, come together, and also 3 professors from all over, and they all together there are 15 persons. They all look on these positions, which has to be discussed, and then we filtered out which artists should be invited lately. And those artists we spoke, me and my team, of course, and then we tried to find out if they already made something in this field, if they made already some kind of graphics already, because it is in our days now, it is getting more and more difficult, because on many of the artists, Kunsthochschulen, art high schools, or they're called, they don't teach the printmaking itself. They don't teach it anymore in a way, or maybe it's just on the side. It's an off space somehow. So for us, it is sometimes now the situation, or more and more the situation, that we have to talk to the artists about, okay, we invite you to come to us to make something for us, for Griffelkunst, make an edition, but do you have an idea what you could make? Woodcut, litho, etching, whatever, or digital print, it's a wide field. And then very often they don't have any idea about it. So we founded a scholarship, for example, years ago, and invite them, if they want, to go for 4 weeks to a printer and just try to find out what they like. If they would like to stand on a stone and make a lithography, and because it has to do something with the mindset of the artist to work with these old techniques. It always means that you have to in a way, to transform your artistic ideas into the technique. And this is back to the collaboration part. So you have to talk to the printer and say, okay, if I would like to make a lithography in 4 colors, that means I have to make 4 stones, and that means I have to make 1 stone for each form in this color. So it is a kind of separation. So it is really a concept behind it. It's really a theoretical thing. And so this is not that easy to say, to start now with the artist, because the basic knowledge about that is getting more and more lost now. And back to your question, how we collaborate or how we work with them is then mainly to think about what could be a way for this guy or this lady to work with us, and then we try to figure out a contact to the printer, and then we start it somehow. So, but it is, we don't go into the content, we don't go into what comes out finally, but we try to build the bridges to the start. Because if we would ask artists when we invite them, what would you like to make for us, then everybody would say an inkjet or maybe a silk screen print is the maximum of what is known still. So this is already also, this part is kind of a teaching job in a way we are doing.
Thank you very much. I'm supposed to ask the next question, so Damien wants to rest a bit. No, you spoke about the fact that schools don't teach anymore printmaking. I think it's different in Switzerland. I think we have printmaking classes, or at least students can go and see what kind of mediums they are interested in, and try a lot of different things. But I was wondering, that's a question to all of you, what do you think could stimulate a new generation of printmakers, or at least of artists who are interested in doing printmaking?
I had this question last week, and for me, if I see schools, for example, I have the feeling that the future is in the future and in the past. So we have to be quite open-minded. We have to keep the knowledge high from the past, but be super open-minded. What's coming next? So, and then it's fun for all of us. Otherwise, we are like a Ballenberg, that we try to keep something that's really dusty and boring. But we need these dusty and boring things to create new techniques. So that's the bridge that you talk about. We have to see what they are looking for. So, and of course, we need also artists like Michael, who search the border, sometimes go over the border, and I think that's how it is. And of course, we are inviting young art schools, and that we have to listen more what they want, and not to teach them what we can. So I think that's my feeling that I have. So the problem is that everybody has, as a craftsman or a teacher, that you speak to them and you don't listen enough from the feedback. And I think it's about, with Michael and me, it's about 50-50. He learned from me and I learned from Michael, and that's much more fun also.
From my side, I could say it is also a question how to deal with this idea of printing. Back to the wording, because it is let's say we're coming from the reproduction, from the idea of how to spread art, the same image in 10 or 100 times. And then it went more into this original graphic thing, and its original graphic thing, which means to bring the artist into the medium and let him develop something with the printer. That was this is of course the most important part of it. But if you see it now that the artists are not, my impression at least is that in Germany it is not so much taught anymore in the schools. And if it is for an artist, the logical way to say, okay, this is my image and I want to reproduce it, just reproduce it, then it would be also okay to say, okay, then make an inkjet print and make it some 100 times. And in our case, it always means we reproduce this thing as often as it was ordered, selected by the members. So the edition can be really high in the end. But for me, it is just important to keep these old techniques running and to let them survive somehow. And this means to bring the artist back into this field again. But it is this is what Tommy said. It is something we have to be open-minded, of course, because if you as an artist only work with digital mediums and spend your whole day in front of the computer, then it is a question if it makes sense if we invite him and say, okay, come on, now you have to make an etching or lithography. So maybe this person should make a digital print, an inkjet print or whatever, but just to keep it in mind that these traditional techniques are so much worth and they are so special, and in our days it is really difficult to keep them, I would say. So it is in our understanding, let's say from Griffel-Kunst, it is both trying to be in the front row of the artistic positions and to be fresh and to be in the focus what is going on in the art world, but on the other side also to try to keep these techniques running. I think this is important.
You said the reproduction, right, is one of the most important things, and you talked about working alone and developing these things out of this idea of reproduction into something else.
Yeah. Well, I said I kind of like, I don't know if you want to finish the question, but I wanted to add something, and maybe I'm going to sound a little bit old-fashioned, but I feel that I really need to say it. I think it relates to a question of time. Because, I mean, I agree, and especially what you were saying, that it's necessary to stay open, and I think that it would actually harm the medium. I mean, as if you want to look at it as it is an institution that needs to be preserved, that if you hold on to it too badly, it's actually going to cause resistance from the other side. However, I feel that the issue that we have nowadays, and I even feel it myself, is about how much time we want to spend on things. And this, to me, came because before I moved to Finland, and maybe it's that I mentioned this because Finland for me was a point of inflection of how I was working or how I was developing my projects, because I stopped for a moment because I was observing my surroundings, and I just felt that I was in some kind of wheel of non-stop of making images, maybe also because of the context that I have around me. And then I had, I don't know, this illumination moment of saying like, but why am I doing it with this medium? I mean, if it's just about like creating, I mean, like you can use many, I mean, there's other means, but I even felt that it was that a form of torture for my body, because it sounds extreme, but if you are graining stones, degreasing plates, I mean, like that is heavy physical work, and you would know, I mean, more than anyone. And so I said like, okay, so is it related to the process? And I mean, in my case, that was the answer. That is that, to me, the secret or the essence of what I might be searching for as an artist is behind the image. But I wonder, I mean, to keep on disseminating that form of working, I mean, not just disseminating knowledge, that actually this is what print has done and helping the democratization, not just of art, I would say of knowledge, but it's just that to keep that, I think that we need to ask ourselves, like, how much are we able to put our bodies through? And maybe this is not just in the context of print. I would just like take that idea, I mean, to anything else, is that we live times where everything is going so fast, which I think that it has is a great advantage for many other things, but I think that the price that we pay is a strong disconnection from the body. And that you would, well, maybe we could talk about psychotherapy and many like take it to other fields, or how even like why we get sick. But I think that in the context of art making, it also has something. I mean, I think that there's a reflection there to make. Like, are we needing to, as artists, and maybe this is what I say from my place, do I need to use my body, and does it make the experience more relevant as a maker?
I think we need to be precise here, right? The one thing is this aspect of creation and multiplication and temporality, and the body as a producer and then as a receptor. And the other one is the question of creation, right? How do we create an image or something from behind the image? And this is also a question of the processes and the temporality of the process. And I mean, you, Theophile, you work in a field where you can, I hope you can relate to what she just said, because you work in a field where both aspects, production and creation, are very much dominated by computers and made perfect in a way by computers, and computers and programs create images now in tenth of seconds perfectly, right? And yet you do exactly what she proposes. You take it back a notch. You don't use that. You use the body to create something in print. Is the reason for that what she's talking about, or is it something else that you look for when you create in this slowness?
Wow. Yeah, it's just one part of the project. It's not, for me, one question came in my mind when I was in the train. It's more the question of when you work with computers, then you can zoom in your works, like all of you can zoom like big size. And when you go to the printers and then you see, for example, you do like, I don't know, 6 months on the same project, doing just layout and stuff, put some precise stuff. And then you arrive to the printer and you say, okay, but now we have just one size. And the only thing that you can see is, or to change the scale of the print is not like the computer or the program, but it's more like, okay, I put the print here or I go back from the print. And that was also a question and a reality for printers, because they say now the people who came to the printer, they say, okay, I need this exactly like this, and you don't have all the the qualification to know how hard it is to print. Yeah.
So to repeat Michel's question, and I want you to answer in French, and then Michel will translate into English. What do you print next and why?
C'est une bonne question. Alors, physiquement, ce sera un livre de poèmes. Ce sera un spécimen typographique poétique. Et là, je venais sur une phrase d'Émile Rudder qui considérait en fait le caractère, dès le moment qu'on n'a pas une capacité à comprendre le caractère, on considère sa forme d'art plutôt que finalement ce qu'on arrive à lire. Et c'est quelque chose qui m'a assez inspiré. En fait, dans mon travail, j'ai envie de créer une fonte qui montre plutôt les contreformes, en fait, et pour se focus sur pas sur la signification, mais plus sur ce qui est autour, en fait. Pas la compréhension, mais le... Ok. Donc c'est ce que j'imprime prochainement, oui.
Tout le monde a compris. Oh, true. And my memory is so bad today. So it's a book, and you're creating a font that actually takes up the space around the character than the character itself. And who c'était the poet? It's a poetry book, and it's by whom is the quote? C'était par qui t'as mentionné?
La citation Émile Rudder, mais Émile Rudder, un typographe suisse,
Okay.
qui lui a dit en fait que dès le moment pardon, oui, que dès le moment qu'en fait, quand on regarde un caractère qui est inconnu,
Yeah.
on passe au travers de la signification, on voit que la beauté esthétique de la forme. Voilà. Et que du coup, dès le moment qu'on comprend ça, le sens en fait est directement lié finalement à la compréhension et au langage, et plus à la forme artistique.
So basically, you're taking what I said about the counter space around the character. That's the essence of that quote.
And it changes the meaning of the font, right? It becomes from a signifier to a signified, and the surrounding space to a signifier. Now we're in the middle of media theory, but it's like very interesting that you kind of really try to use the process of printing to make visible something that normally isn't visible in the printed book, right? So the poetic space, in a way, that Inma has been talking about becomes legible and visible in this process. Which leads to the next question, Michael.
Is it my question?
It looked like it.
No, I was just trying to point out, maybe, I don't know where your question is going, but
It's not a question. I'm just paraphrasing in a more general way what he's saying.
because I thought it was very interesting talking about actually zooming in, zooming out, because that's something, how you say, on a screen you can zoom in, zoom out without moving your own body. While if you're looking at the piece of paper, at the book, it's always about distance to the thing where you actually have to move your body. And that's something of the very interesting parts of digital tools that we're working on when we're talking about innovation, development, what comes in the future. It's very, very interesting to understand what we're actually dealing with when we're talking about digital tools, because that's crucial to print and how it will develop in the future, because actually digital media brought us in this situation where at the moment where the reproduction of texts there's no longer a monopole on the print, which it had for over 500 years. And that's a crucial situation. And I think that's why print is so important in the arts today. So sorry, I'm a bit fast in the association. I hope you can follow. But I think just the acknowledgement of digital tools, and I specifically say tools, to not make it bigger than what it actually is, has a crucial role of what the role of the arts is today in printmaking. It's not a question, I'm sorry.
No, but it leads to a lot of questions. I think we need to be a little bit more precise there. Or more specifically, you need to be a little bit more precise there. Can you try to kind of make it, to pinpoint it a little more? So why is the role of art then so important?
Talking about time.
Yes.
Each technology has its time window. When you look at history of the humanity, there's certain techniques that come, there's certain techniques that go, that are used more, that are used less often. I think, and printing had this great effect. Gutenberg's invention of letters, of being able to print text, had a massive influence on us directly. Even the idea of libraries are not thinkable, because before everything was handwritten, then suddenly was printed. Texts were disseminated all over Europe. It was a huge thing. The same with images. Actually, were also printed. And suddenly, now in the past 30, 40 years, this whole thing changes. And it changes the whole industry, because before someone we as artists, we profited from all that knowledge that was there from mass reproduction. And suddenly the arts should actually save the technologies of printmakings, because who else uses this? Because it's not used anymore normally. So that's an interesting role that we have at the moment. And I think the arts are very good in exploring these open fields that suddenly open up when something vanishes, when something goes away. And I'm always curious to find out what do the different artists do there. A good example is vinyl records. Everyone thought it's dead when compact discs came. And suddenly there were lots of artists, sound artists starting to make, there's a certain quality in vinyl records recording. And nowadays it's still alive, even though it's a niche product, but it's very precise. It always leads also to precision of how we use these techniques. And I observe that also in print. And I think that's why we have to distinguish very closely. Are we in mass reproduction or are we in printing for the arts? So.
But do you really think that digital tools are a threat to the arts in general, but to printmaking? Because I think we've already been in that situation where a new technology comes, but still the oldest one remain. And I think that's the history of printmaking, because it's always been, I mean, every new technique was a way to facilitate the handwork. I mean, lithography is a way of making a drawing and then multiplying it very easily. You don't have to use a burin or, to work on a metal plate, which I think no one does that today. How do you see it from your,
Yeah, I think we have to be careful that we don't say, okay, Gutenberg was 700 years, 200 years ago was Senefelder. What we have now, that we sometimes think that when we are in the future, if a young designer open up Photoshop, for example, if you see these tools on the Photoshop, it's the knife, it's the brush, and then I ask, who is copying who? And I think it's a collaboration. And that's the situation where I have to talk with artists. What's the best tool for you? Is it the digital brush? Is it I don't want to give him advice at what's the best for him, but we have to have the knowledge of all these tools, and then we can decide how fast and how slow we should work in the studio. And I don't make the decision as a print shop, but I try to help him to have these tools ready. And then, it's a collaboration of the editor has to give this field that we have time to think. We cannot, because that's the difference between an offset print shop and an art studio. Even if I print a photo, I don't get a PDF ready and then we print. I need the artist in the studio. We need time. We have to discuss this piece. If we make a transfer on the stone from a photo image, or if he adds it by hand, that's not the point. We have to know what's the best for the artist to produce a good thing. Because if we use the fastest way, then we are in the industry. Then we can start designing posters, and people do that. We know that, but I think that's not our business. But I don't know what was the question. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I also think that everything coexists, and I guess the artists look for what's best to express their vision or their idea. And
sorry, I would like to involve Dirk, because when we make a break, we're talking about money, and I think that's a very important part in printing. Everything is. It costs money. Mm-hmm. Most of the artists, they have a studio at home, and then they have to rent another studio to produce prints. So then you have to be sure, does that make sense? And I think that's one of the good things that it costs some money, because then you get think, wow, what do we print next? Does it make sense? Should we only print one piece, or should we print 500? I like this discussion. I like to talk about money, even if you don't. It's not my best field, but I think it's part of the game.
If we talk about money, of course, the history of money is a history of printing, right? And the history of minting and the history of printing are very much intermingled. And the history of how money is produced in Switzerland is produced by Aurel Füssli, right, which comes out of a print workshop, but now uses digital means. And talking about money leads me to my next question. What a segue. We talk about what we print next, but what do we buy next is also a question. So these digital tools and possibilities, there's these tools that we discussed and Michael employs to find new ways of expressions and working with material. If you are the head of a collection, what are you more interested in? And then the question goes to you, what do we exhibit next, right? So how do you deal with compiling a collection and exhibiting and compiling collections? How do you, the two of you as end users, deal with this?
Are you referring to digital art as well?
The digital art and printing, handmade, and the temporalities of production, all that we discussed now, how do you look at that and how do you buy it? How do you add to the collection?
Ooh. I mean, what we buy next is very often guided by what is exhibited, what I actually find in galleries or in museums, or also what I find directly from talking to the artists. It's not very, I mean, I don't have a plan as such. I always have to consider what we already have in the collection so that it's an addition to what we already have. Like, for example, we try to buy works of art from the artists that we already have in the collection from various phases of their work. And that can mean that they're working in a completely different medium all of a sudden, like printing, like Otzilla, for example, who we already mentioned, who did a lot of drawing, did a lot of film, creating these rooms, and now she's sort of fascinated by the monotypes and the printing techniques. So that's something that we take up in our collection. Personally, I'm not a great fan of digital works for the collection, just because I feel that we're looking into computer screens all day long, and I like to have something where you feel there's a bit of structure, there's a smell to it, you can sort of feel, at least with your brain, with your memory, you know what it ought to feel like when you touch it or when it's being produced, something like that. That's why I also like the title with the, sorry, I've forgotten the title, but because of the sound, the crackling sound, yes, because it just brings in another dimension to the artwork that you look at, but there's something going on in your brain. Same thing with smells, for example, but that's not really what you asked. You asked what was the next thing. I can't say what the next thing will be that we buy, but those are sort of things that I reflect before I buy something for the collection. Yeah.
Yeah, as for us, we don't make any difference between a painting, digital art, or a print. We buy what artists do, so it really depends on what they produce, and then we look what's the meaning behind the work. I mean, I would be interested in why they pick up this technique and what does that produce? And if there's a good education between the two, I think that makes the work interesting. Then, of course, as a museum with limited means and limited place, we will look at works that we are sure we are able to keep and to keep for next generations. So we have a responsibility regarding, we spoke a lot this morning about, putting those paper under the sun. Once it's in a museum collection, you don't really do that. I mean, you won't do that. Here it's a specific condition of the exhibition and an agreement between the artist and the museum. And I think this is great because it really shows the work as if it was anything else. I mean, any other medium. But in the museum, you will look at the way you will have to, it's like a promise. You need to keep the things you buy. And you can't always do that because you never know what happens with materials. And I can say that in the collection we have works made 20, 30 years ago, and that's very hard to keep them today. So then you have to restore them, and it's not always a possibility. So I don't make a difference between the mediums. I'm just interested in what the artist wants to say and how he says it.
Thank you. These are the key questions when you arrive in an institution that is so connoted in a specific place as well. So, of course, you look at the history of the collection and you ask yourself, how much shall I honor that, respect that, and continue that in the kind of like same vein that it was created? And that is kind of like it's a public service, and it's a collection for the city, for the inhabitants, for the community, for the region, for the canton, and you really have to have those filters in your head, because it's not your personal taste, your ego, your artist friends, your PhD research, or all these things that can influence also the mindset of a curator or a director. So I think it's also a political, ethical responsibility what you collect next towards a community that you represent. But also, it's also, I wouldn't do my job correctly if I wouldn't also challenge what has been done so far. Because thinking about the future, we have to go, we have to think, we have to, rather than keep on doing the same that has been done so far, we also have to challenge the community, maybe even talk to the community and have them participate. So I'm thinking about collecting in a much more participatory way for the future. For example, I'm sure you all know it. It's called Nouveau Commandataire. It's a really beautiful project. It exists in multiple countries, and they really help a place or a community. They find a problem and they try to solve it through art and artists. So I'm more thinking in those veins for the future. And also from a political point of view, the first thing that I did when I arrived was to count, for example, how many women there are in the collection. And sadly, I realized there is 17% versus 83%. So I would feel really bad, to use a euphemism, if I did not acknowledge this. And so for me, it's really important. And what we will collect next for sure is female artists, but not just because of their genre, but because they have been so underrepresented in collections worldwide that I have this opportunity now today to do it here, and I have to do it here. And as Laurence was saying, also for me, it's not really about the medium, because I think medium specificity is the killer of creativity. And what emerged in all your conversations that I was really fascinated is there is this kind of subtle, latent tension between content and process. Maybe because I come from literature, but for me, content and the story behind an artwork, it's the first thing that I'm interested in. And then It can be a drawing, it can be a print, a painting, a sculpture. It doesn't really matter. And I have the impression that while I do agree that we need to preserve ancient processes, I think that we should not be obsessed by processes, and an artwork should not be under it shouldn't become the hostage of the process, but the idea, the message, the storytelling, I don't say it should prevail, but there should be a more kind of balanced relationship between the two.
Someone please come to Or shall we do the contradictions after the break?
Okay. No. It's not about. It's not
Take
really
it
about
close to your mouth.
Okay, like this. No, I lost it. Maybe we should have a break.
So I'll have a lot of contradictions. I disagree in a lot of the points you just made. I think we'll go from there. After the break, we take a 15-minute break. So you talked about the smell of things, Chris. So please go and smell Michael's prints. You're not allowed to touch it. It's a museum, but you're allowed to smell it so that these people don't have a heart attack. Try to find a middle distance, but please go and smell the prints.